How's it going, everybody? This is the Exodus Bible Study Part 2. The first part, I gave you Moses and Aaron, a little bit of a run through about them. In this one, I'm going to only give you chapters 1 through 15. And then in Part 3, I will give you chapters 16 through 30. And then next part will be chapters 31 to 40. And then I'll have a part after that where I'll explain some people, places, and terms, because there is a few new terms that are added in Exodus that was not in Genesis. But I'm going to give a few seconds of silence because on the screen, just like the last one, I'm going to give an outline of Exodus in a way that I had broke it down for you guys. Okay, that should have been long enough because you can just pause it in between frames of it. To start out, basically, in Exodus chapter 1, so basically, by this time, Joseph died, and all his brothers and all the generations were still living in Egypt at this time. But the people in Israel multiplied. They were a lot more than they were in Joseph's times at the end of Genesis. By this time, they were living under a new king also. He didn't know the deals, you could say, I guess, that Joseph had with the old Pharaoh. This was a completely different guy, so the aspects of how Joseph had shown him about our God, this new king was not in the same aspect as that Pharaoh was. He said they are becoming too much and too strong for us, is what he had said. So he told the midwives to kill the sons when they are born and to keep the daughters alive. But since the midwives were faithful to God, they did not. So God bore them children. By this point, they were told that if any boys are born from a Hebrew, we cast them into the Nile. And then we get to Exodus chapter 2. So a man of the house of Levi took his wife and bore a son. She kept him for 3 months till she couldn't hide him no more. And then she put him in a basket and let him go down the Nile. This, of course, is Moses. The daughter of the Pharaoh seen the basket and kept the baby. And they gave him the name Moses because she said, I drew him out of water. That's what the name Moses means. I drew him out of water. So one day Moses seen a Hebrew getting beat. So he struck the man down and left. And then the next day, he seen 2 Hebrews getting beat this time. He stopped them and he said, or he stopped those guys, and those guys says, are you going to kill me too? So by that point, Moses got scared and he fled. He fled to a town called Midian. There he met a woman named Zipporah, and she bore him a son named Gershom, if I say his name right, Gershom. Once the Pharaoh died, the people of Israel were still suffering and crying out, and God heard this, and he had a plan, is basically what it gives you through that. He had the plan, and that's where we get into Exodus chapter 3. In Exodus chapter 3, sum it up, Moses and the burning bush is pretty much how we can sum this chapter up, but that's not all I'm going to give you. Moses sees a burning bush and he approaches it. God says, Moses. Moses says, here I am. Lord tells him that he hears the suffering of his people in Egypt. And it is to set them free from the land so they can go to the land of honey and milk. Is the plan he had for them, where the Hittites, the Canaanites, and the other ancient civilizations live, the ones I had talked about. There's a reason why I talked about the Canaanites and the Hittites in Genesis, because they're a big part of Exodus also, along with the other little ones, but I mean, these are some of the biggest names. But he says to gather the elders of Israel and go to the king of Egypt. He asked why, or then he asked, why should I? And he tells him, the father of Abraham, Isaiah, and Jacob is the reason why. I am is the name that he gives him. He says, I know the king won't let you go, so I will compel him with a mighty hand. So he's already telling him a little bit of the master plan, and I imagine there's more that he had said to Moses than we are given. But then we get to Exodus chapter 4. 2 ways to label this chapter. You could put it signs from Moses, and Moses returns to Egypt. As Moses was talking to God, he was worried that they wouldn't listen to him. So God said, "Place your staff on the ground and it will turn into a snake." So he did this and he ran from it. But God said, "Pick it up by the tail." And he did, and as soon as he picked it up by the tail, it turns back into a staff. I imagine he was pretty scared. I know I would be. I mean, what kind of witchery is this? You'd be thinking that. Especially back in the Old Testament days, a lot of people really had thought things like this. Then he said, "Put your hand on your cloak." And then when he pulled it out, it was leopardus like snow. And then when he put it back in his cloak and pulled it out, he was healed. So here was God showing him, hey, I'm just reminding you who I am so you know who I am, that I just cured you of leopard seed, a disease they had back then. And I think a disease that still goes around, but there's a lot of modern day medicines that doesn't really allow some of these old plagues of diseases they got back then, because simply they just didn't have the medicine and the stuff we have of nowadays. So God said, if they don't believe, that draw some water, pour it on the dry ground, and I will turn it to blood. So then Moses said, "But I am slow of tongue. Can you please send me someone else to do this?" Basically, he had a speech impediment. Maybe he had a stuttering problem, hard telling. But basically, he tells him, "I can't do it." So God got mad at him at this point and said, "I have sent your brother Aaron to you. I know that he can speak well. He will be your mouth, and I will be like," or he doesn't say that. He says, "He will be your mouth, and you will be like God to him." He literally tells him, he says, "You will literally be like God to Moses," or to Aaron. Moses will be like God to Aaron. So Moses returns to his father-in-law and tells him he is leaving. He takes his wife and sons. He does have 2 sons. He meets up with Aaron in the desert, and they prepare for the job at hand. It is pretty much a way to sum that chapter up. They're preparing for the job that God had gave Moses when he talked to him on the burning bush. So that takes us to Exodus chapter 5. So Moses and Aaron, by this point, they go to the Pharaoh and they tell him what the Lord had said. He in return called the Israelites lazy. He literally had the audacity to call the people of Israel lazy, even though they were busting their humps for this guy to being slaves and building their town. But so he said, "No more foremen getting them their straw to make bricks. They are to gather them and to keep the same quota of bricks being made." You imagine how hard that is. They already had a quota of bricks they had made, but they had their foremen go and get the straw for them to make the bricks. Now they have to do the same quota of work for the Pharaoh, but they have to do twice as much work. Upon this quota, it was not getting met, and the Pharaoh was unpleased. And I imagine it wasn't getting met because this is double the work in the day's time they were given. So he brought the Israelite foreman in and he beat him. Once he came back out, they seen Moses and Aaron. Moses then talked to the Lord, saying, "Why do your people suffer? Why don't you save them?" And that's where he takes us to Exodus chapter 6, where the Lord tells Moses, "Now you will see what I will do to the Pharaoh." Through all this complaining of the Israelites, crying out to him and the suffering, and through all the complaining that Moses had gave him, saying, "I can't speak well," and all that, this is where he's telling him, "You're going to see my plot formulate out." So God will let his people go because of the covenant he had with Abraham's descendants. A lot of these descendants, this is talking about back in Genesis 10, back when I said it's like the table of nations, the genealogy pool. A lot of these descendants of the covenant of Abraham, you could find them in Genesis 10. They go from the Abraham, Isaac, and then Isaac has Jacob, and Jacob has Judah. Those are the sons that are in the genealogy pool of Jesus, even though this has nothing to do with Exodus. But I thought I'd just add that in there. But Moses tells the Israelites these things, and of course they didn't listen because they felt that God had betrayed them. I'm pretty sure they're sitting here as slaves. They remember what Joseph had told them, that before he had died, that there is a covenant with our Lord. He will always keep over us. And then by this point where they're at in Egypt, they're getting beaten and treated like slaves. So I can imagine they didn't want to listen at first. So Moses tells God, how will the Pharaoh listen to me if the Israelites don't? Again, he talks about his speech problem to God. Here gives you a breakdown of the clans and the people, like in Genesis chapter 10. It kind of gives you a breakdown in this chapter also. Then once again at the end of the chapter, Moses says again, how will the Pharaoh listen to me? He asks God this same question again. And, a lot of us could maybe read upon that and be like, well, how could you continuously ask God the same question over and over again? Well, we've done the same, really. Every one of us are just as guilty for asking God the same question over and over again. And sometimes it's really a selfish question. But that's where I take us to Exodus chapter 7. We're halfway through. Here's some things we could say about this chapter, I guess. Aaron speaks for Moses is one way we can break it down. Aaron's staff becomes a snake, and the plague of blood is really just a short way we can break this down. But a longer way I can break it down is by this point, Moses was noted to be 80 years old, and Aaron was to be 83 years old. Aaron was 3 years his elder. God tells Moses that he has made him like God to Pharaoh, and Aaron is his prophet. You are to tell everything I command you, and Aaron is to tell the Pharaoh to let his people go. Then Aaron, later on in the chapter, he throws his staff in front of the Pharaoh and his officials, and it becomes a snake, and the Pharaoh, unfazed, brings his sorcerers in, and they, in their secret arts of magic that they did the same thing, the Bible says, that Aaron did. So whatever type of religion they were practicing, of course, it's not Christianity. They're saying in this point that, and it happens a lot through this point when they keep coming to him trying to show plagues that, and eventually I'll get to the point, there's a plague that they cannot do, which shows that our God is above all other gods. But Aaron swallowed up all the other ones, and the Pharaoh's heart became hardened, just as the Lord said it would. So then Moses meets Pharaoh the next morning by the Nile while they're drawing water, and Aaron and Moses do as the Lord says. And the water was then turned to blood, but the Pharaoh had his magicians do the same thing, and this hardened his heart again. Since the people couldn't drink from the river, they dug along the side of the Nile to get water because that water didn't have blood in it. So they found a way around this. They continued to keep on defying the fact that there was a plague coming. And that's why God brings the rest of these plagues. When we get to Exodus chapter 8, you can break it down to a plague of frogs, gnats, and flies. And gnats and flies are disgusting. I despise gnats and flies. I'm eating dinner and I see a gnat or fly flying around. It's almost like I don't even want to eat no more because they land on poop and everything. I'm just being real with you. And you even see points in the Bible where God really is annoyed by flies and gnats too. So maybe that's why us humans are so annoyed by gnats and flies, because we're created in an image of him. And I'm getting a little carried away here. So in Exodus chapter 8, so Moses tells Pharaoh the same things that God said. He keeps coming back to him every day and saying things to him. And God said this time there will be frogs. So he tells Aaron to do the same thing as last time, but this time to use frogs to cover all the land, the people, the waters, the homes, etc. You get the point. But Pharaoh had his magicians do the same things. They summoned frogs. Pharaoh said, you can pray to your Lord to kill all the frogs, but those in the Nile. So Moses prays, and the Lord does this wish, and Pharaoh hardens his heart again. So in a snap of a fingers, pretty much, if you kind of get the concept of it, he snaps his fingers and God just makes him disappear, it seems like, is how it's telling us. But he hardens his heart again. So the Lord tells Moses to tell Aaron to use his staff on the dust on the ground to produce gnats. Imagine the desert dust becoming gnats. There's a lot of desert dust. So I imagine these were a lot of gnats because it says it covered the animals and people. And by this point, there was a lot of people living in Egypt. So it covered them. But the magicians could not do this. And they said to Pharaoh, this is God. He hardened his heart again. So Moses met with Pharaoh at the water again and told him what God said again. And he said, if you don't, you will be struck with flies. But the land where my people are will have no flies to show my power. Then the flies came, and Pharaoh said, I will let them do their offering to the Lord as you have asked, but it has to be in my land. And as you read this, you see Moses keeps telling him that we need to leave your land to go out in the desert and do it. So by this point, he's defying the request. He's saying, I will give you the request of you guys can go do the offering, but on my circumstances, in my land. And maybe because he was a little curious, maybe that he wanted to see what they were doing because these plagues had happened. I don't know. The Bible doesn't really tell us what was on Pharaoh's mind because Moses doesn't know what was on his mind. But by that point, he tells them, or he tells him no, basically. Moses says, no, it has to be in the desert, not here. God had told me to do it. I got to be obedient. It's got to be out here. So Pharaoh says, go and pray for the flies to leave. So Moses does, but Pharaoh hardened his heart again and doesn't let the people go like he said he would. God warned him through Moses, don't harden your heart again. And he did. And then we get to Exodus chapter 9. This can be called the plague of livestock. So the Lord tells Moses to go to Pharaoh again. Same scenario. It's like almost every morning they're coming and talking to each other after the next day of plagues happen. But this time he tells him the plague will strike your livestock, but not the Israelites' livestock. So the next morning that happened. All the livestock of Egypt had died, but not the Israelites' livestock. Then the Lord tells Moses and Aaron to grab the soot of the furnace, which is ash, to grab it out of the furnace and to throw it in the air. Just throw it in the air. As he throws it in the air, then a plague of boils unleashed on the people. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Pharaoh that I could have wiped you off the face of the earth by now, but I chose not to. So this time tomorrow I will send the worst hailstorm ever. And anyone who is not in shelter, human or animal, will die. Some listen and some didn't, which is in today's society. You see it. Some people listen, some people don't. And the only place that did not have hail was where the Israelites lived. So then Pharaoh tells Moses, I have sinned, and tell the Lord to stop, and I will let them go. So Moses prayed, like he's been doing, and it stopped. But the Pharaoh did not let them go again. He sinned again. This was once again another test that the Pharaoh had failed. So then it takes us to Exodus chapter 10. This can be two parts, the plague of locusts and the plague of darkness. So the Lord tells Moses to tell his children and grandchildren of these stories to remind them pretty much, I am God. So Moses tells the Pharaoh, how long will you deny your people to worship our God? So of course, Pharaoh's sitting here. And he said, and then Moses said, let us go so we may, after he asked him this question. If you don't, this time tomorrow, locusts will devour your land, what is left of it. Because before that, the hailstorm damaged a lot of things. So the locusts are coming in for the kill shot, pretty much. Then Moses left, and the Pharaoh's officials asked, how long do we have to deal with this, Pharaoh? They're telling him, can you please let them go? They are ruining our city. So the Pharaoh calls for Moses and Aaron and tells them, if I let you go, who goes with you? Moses tells him, the young, the old, the sons, the daughters, the herds, the livestock, so we may worship our God. Then Pharaoh says, just the men can go, since that's what you are asking for. So the Lord tells Moses to unleash the locusts upon them. So the locusts, they're being told to come here and leave nothing green left. And the Pharaoh said, I sinned, I will let you guys go, pray for me. So the Lord stopped the locusts, but the Pharaoh lied once again. And the Lord hardened his heart. So then the Lord said, stretch your hands towards the sky, and it will be dark for 3 days, but not where the Israelites live. So imagine this. The Israelites are pretty much probably living in this little circle in the middle of Egypt, and the sun's just shining on them for 3 days while the rest of it's black. That'd be pretty freaky. I mean, I would be praying every day like this is the end of the world. But once he did this, the Pharaoh had seen this, and he said, "You can all go, but the herds of livestock." But Moses said, "We need them for our burnt offerings, because they use these for burnt offerings." So the Pharaoh tells him, "Out of my presence, if I see your face again, you will die." So he tells him. So when we get to Exodus chapter 11, it is the plague of the firstborns. So Moses is told by the Lord that I will bring one more plague and he will let you guys go, basically. Tell them about at midnight the Lord will go through Egypt and kill every firstborn, no matter from who in Egypt. Every firstborn cattle also. There will be a wailing like none other. But the Israelites will not even have a dog bark at this. So you will know the difference between Egypt and Israel. He has him put blood over the doors to basically realize this house is Israel, this house ain't. So, but after all this, the Lord will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will not let the Israelites go out of his country again. So it's when we get to Exodus chapter 12. In this chapter, the Lord is telling Moses and Aaron how Passover will be. To eat the lamb, how to cook it, how to eat it, how to celebrate. He gives them instructions about this. He even gives them a day of the month. He tells them to eat in a haste and to burn the leftovers the next morning. Don't keep the leftovers. He tells them to put the blood of the lambs on the doors so that night when he is to kill the Egyptians' firstborn and humans and animals, he will skip those homes like I'd said. He tells them to eat bread without yeast for 7 days or they will be cut from Israel. On the first and the last day, hold a sacred assembly. On this celebration, no work but the food being made for 7 days. He tells them, wherever you live, no yeast on these days. Wonder what that means for us. It says the first month. So I just really wonder what that means for us in this world. Because it says in the first month, the 14th to the 21st, but the Hebrews' first month is not the same as ours. So Moses then explains to them all of this. And at midnight, the Lord went through Egypt and killed all the firstborns. And the Egyptians had woke up from the wailing sounds of this. And then Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron, even though he said, next time I see your face, I'll kill him. He summons them and says, you guys may go and worship your God. So I will explain the word Exodus, or I kind of did in the video before, because it is a big deal. Why the word Exodus? Because this is the point when it is the taking of the Israelites out of Egypt. So then we only got a couple more chapters left. Exodus 13, this chapter can be called the concentration of the firstborn. The Lord tells Moses to consecrate to me every firstborn male. He said the animals too. So Moses said to the people what God said, and on that day it is called Abib, or it is believed to be kind of mid-March, mid-April is what they believe Abib is between March and April for Hebrews. They will be in the land that God had promised your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so on, your forefathers. And he tells them that you will go to land of milk and honey, like I said in the beginning. This is where the Canaanites, the Hittites, etc., like he said in the beginning of the Bible, they live, that we talked about. And Moses tells them about the no yeast in this day also. He explains to them how to celebrate. He goes through and says that God would give you a sign on your hand, a symbol on your forehead, that the Lord redeemed you out of Egypt. Then the Lord gave a pillar of clouds by day and a pillar of fire by night to guide them on their endeavor. He also took Joseph's bones, ironically, he took Joseph's bones like he had asked the Israelites in Genesis 50 when he died, that whenever they come up out of this land, he would love to be buried in a different land. So Moses took them with him to do as he had asked before he died. Even though Moses wasn't alive at the time, he knew of the covenant that Joseph had left with the Israelites in Egypt, that he wanted his bones not to be kept in Egypt. So Exodus 14, we can call this the crossing of the sea. Then the Lord told Moses to have the Israelites turn back and camp here, between the sea. This way the Pharaoh might think they are confused, and the Lord will harden his heart to pursue them. Then the Pharaoh and his officials wished they didn't let them go, so now they got on their best chariots and horse riders and troops that they could get, and they went to go approach the Israelites. Then the Israelites seen that there was an army coming, and they told Moses they wished that they would have just left them alone to be in Egypt instead of dying in the desert. They were thinking by this point, you brought us out here to get killed. This psychotic man who said that he was listening to God, and we believed it at first, but now we see an army marching towards us. So then Moses tells them, don't be afraid. He tells the Egyptians, you see are no more. Then Lord, our God, tells them to get moving, and I will show the Pharaoh who I am. Stretch out your staff over the sea. Then an angel moved in the back of the Israelites, and the pillars moved too. And the Lord told Moses to stretch his staff out again, but this time the waters came down as they were trying to pursue him, and it killed every last one of the Egyptians. I know I kind of broke it a little shorter than really what the chapter is, but I'm just trying to give you a short little tidbit of it that you can use while reading it. Then before I close this is the last one of this study here, is Exodus chapter 15. The first half of this chapter is 2 songs being sung. Moses and the Israelites sing a song to the Lord because they see the sea part and all that. They clearly realize Moses is for real. And then Miriam, the prophetess, Aaron's sister, she had all the women follow her with tambourines and dancing, and then she sung a song also. Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea to the desert of Shur. They had no water because it was bitter. So Moses cried to the Lord, and the Lord gave him a piece of wood, and he put the wood in the water, and the water became sweet. God then tested them and makes a decree with them. He tells them how to follow and listen to him. If they do this, they will be healed from anything and never get any of those diseases, or these diseases. They then came next to a place that had 12 springs and 70 palm trees. And this is where they camped at. And I'm going to close it at that because then we get into Exodus chapter 16. That's for the next part. And it's been a really interesting. I've read Exodus before, but reading it and kind of studying it a little bit, it's been pretty interesting. And God bless you guys, and I love you guys. And be waiting next week for part 3. I'll give Exodus chapter 16 through 30. Then we'll just have 10 chapters left. I'm going to break these down differently depending on the size of the chapter or the book, and size of some of the chapters in the book, because some chapters can literally be a couple paragraphs, some can be a page long. It also just depends on how many chapters. Like Genesis had 50, Exodus has 40. There's going to be some books we get to that, of course, are only one book, and they can be summed up in probably just one video. But I thank you guys for enjoying these, the ones that do watch these. And if anybody hasn't got to watch them, I encourage you to try to listen to them and slowly go through and try to take my little bit of knowledge I had into it with your own knowledge and what the knowledge of God gives you in that, and just use it as a trifecta, because it always is beneficial to us Christians to also hear from another Christian about their studies they had on something compared to your studies and compared to God. And it's just a good way to look at the Bible. It can help you interpret a little better. So I thank you guys for watching these videos. Please hit the subscribe button, like it, comment on it, and God bless you guys.